And yes, a warm welcome to all of you, to each of you gathered here today to practice together. And this is Sunday Sounds of Dhamma. As usual, we'll have about half an hour of meditation, half an hour of Dhamma talk, and some time for questions, reflections, comments before the dedication of merit. Welcome. And before that, I want to say, as many of you know, excuse me, there's Sangha brunch this afternoon, today, after the talk. So if you're local and you can zip on over, you're welcome to do that. Also, registration still open for both of the 2 January retreats, one hosted by Buddhist Global Relief. That's a virtual retreat with myself and 3 other nuns. And the other retreat at the end of January hosted by Barry Center for Buddhist Studies, which is a residential retreat on how to establish momentum in your practice. Welcome, Jesse. Great. And yeah, also keep an eye on the calendar. I'm going to be taking some retreat time for myself toward the end of January. The Vihara will be closed for a few weeks at the end of January. Although we will still be doing some of the virtual programs. So with that, I think we're about ready to get started with our meditation this morning. And so I thought that today we would do a practice of meditation on the elements. It's going to tie a little bit into my talk. And we're going to take a somewhat intuitive approach rather than scanning the body, looking for elements. We're going to see if we can discover them as we settle into the body. So with that, I invite you to go ahead and begin to move into your balanced meditation posture. I always like to begin with a bit of movement, maybe rocking the body from side to side and front to back. Maybe moving the head and the shoulders. You can place the hands somewhere where they feel comfortable. If you want to lower the energy of the body, you can place the hands flat on the thighs, palms down. Or if you want to gather the energy together, particularly if you start to feel sleepy, you can rest them in your lap, one hand on top of the other, and the thumb tips touching. And then turning the attention a bit lower in the body to the place where you can feel the supports underneath you. Whether it's a cushion or a chair or a couch, whatever you're using as supports, begin to feel them underneath you. Allowing the body to really settle and be supported. Perhaps you can feel the firmness of the body meeting the firmness of the supports. Feel the pelvic bones and the spine holding you up. And that's earth element. Naturally stable and steady. internal earth element in the form of bones. An external earth element as the supports beneath you, and ultimately the planet beneath you. Same earth element, internally and externally. Now moving the attention back up the torso to the chest. Just aware of the breath, breathing the body. No need to change anything. Just receiving the breath as it is, slow or fast, tight or relaxed. And becoming aware of the rush of air coming in and going out. Wherever you feel it. maybe at the tip of the nose or in the nostrils, in the throat, or even the mouth, or in the chest, the rise and fall. Just observing, receiving that activity of breathing. So in this way, we can clearly perceive the air element becoming part of the body and leaving, becoming part of the environment again. So thanks to the work of the lungs, that air is absorbed and becomes part of our bodies, comes the internal air element. And the air all around us, in the room and in the sky, is the external air element. Bringing with it the quality of movement and spaciousness. Now turning the attention to warmth in the body, some place where you can feel the warmth, maybe in your chest or your armpits. Maybe your hands. So aware of the heat of the body. That is a fire element. These bodies burning calories, generating heat. And if you're sitting in a room that's comfortable enough for human life, there's some degree of heat and warmth around you, the external fire element. And finally, moving the attention to the mouth, aware of moisture in the mouth. No need to make anything happen. There's some degree of water element that you can discern in the mouth in each moment. Externally, there's some degree of humidity in the air, some water in your taps, some clouds in the sky. All the external water element, same as the internal water element. That was our elements meditation for today. Hopefully that was interesting and relaxing. So I'm going to move right into the Dhamma talk for today and begin as ever with the homage to the Triple Gem. So folks can see it on screen. Everyone is invited to chant along if you would like, but please do keep your mics muted for folks online. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. want to begin by telling you a story. It's a story that I've told many times in the past. Some of you may know it. But I want to link it to a sutta that I don't often speak about and talk a little bit about, you could say, the benefits of practice and intention. So, a very long time ago, in a place not so far away, my daughter Kayla was about to turn 3 years old. And she was in daycare at that time. Both my husband and I had to work to keep the family going. And so when it was time for her birthday, I thought, oh, great. I will have her birthday party at the daycare because all her little friends are already there. And then I'll have help with cleaning up and it'll be all great. So on the day of her birthday, I'd already, of course, talked to them about it and such. So they were getting ready. And I left work at lunchtime and ran on over to the ice cream shop and got a little cup of ice cream for each kid and a bag of sprinkles. Because, ice cream without sprinkles would be not a birthday party, really. So I ran over there now this is in Florida, so mind you that the ice cream is melting from the moment it reaches my car. And I drive over to the daycare and I walk in and the daycare teacher already has set out the tables and has the kids all set up there, has all the kids seated at these long rectangular tables, ready to go. She knows I'm coming with the party food. And so all the kids are sitting there. So I start putting out a cup of ice cream in front of each kid. And I put one down in front of this little boy who was at the opposite end of the table from Kayla. And I honestly don't remember his name, but it doesn't matter because what I do remember about him was that he was Kayla's hugging buddy. They loved to hug one another. They were good friends. And so I will always remember him as Hugging Buddy. So Hugging Buddy was seated at the other end of the table, and I put a cup of ice cream down in front of him. And immediately the daycare teacher came over and took the ice cream from him. And she said, no, 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 he can't have it. He's lactose intolerant. Ah, well, guess what? It had not even occurred to me that that might be the case. So I didn't bring anything else besides the ice cream for the party. And Hugging Buddy got very upset as soon as she took that ice cream from him. The little guy started crying. And he was crying hard. He was very upset. One minute he had an ice cream, and the next minute he didn't have an ice cream. And so the teacher, looked at me and I looked at the teacher. And by this time, the other kids are starting to eat their ice creams and stuff is making it worse, right? They're all kind of wondering what's happening with him, but they're eating their ice cream nonetheless. And so she says to me, the daycare teacher says to me, well, maybe a big cookie. We have these giant cookies. We usually don't even give the kids the whole cookie because they're so huge. But maybe if I give him the cookie, that will help him feel better. And so I said, okay, great. So she goes, she runs, fetches a cookie. She puts a cookie down in front of him and nothing. Hugging Buddy is still very upset. He's still crying, crying, crying. He is not having any of it. No, no, no. What he wanted was ice cream. So this goes on for a few more minutes, and the daycare teacher says to me, "Well, what do you think? Another cookie?" I'm like, I have no idea what's going to help here. I don't know, but if you think so, then let's try it. So she goes, runs, gets another one of these giant cookies, like as big as his little face. And she puts it down in front of him. And then there is a moment, the pivotal moment comes. And you see him, I saw him look down at the cookie and make the decision. He might not know that that's what's going on, right? But that's what's actually happening. He is making the decision whether or not he's going to stop clinging to the suffering of having lost the ice cream and instead have the cookie. So in that moment, he decides, yes, he's willing. He's willing to eat the cookie. And so he starts eating his cookie and he stops crying little bit by little bit. He stops crying, right? And he starts eating his cookie. So what's happening in this story? This story has very much impressed me, and that's why I tell it often, because it's very, I think, a good illustration. It's very illustrative of the Dhamma, the teachings that we hear all the time. So when the Buddha first defined dukkha in his very first talk, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the first turning of the wheel, he says one aspect of dukkha is not getting what you want. One aspect of dukkha is getting what you don't want. That's what's happening for this little guy. He wanted the ice cream. He doesn't understand that it's harmful to him, right? He doesn't understand that this is compassion, actually. Not giving him the ice cream is a compassionate act. He doesn't understand that. He just wants what he wants, right? So he has this unpleasant feeling, this dukkha, this suffering that comes up, this dissatisfaction that comes up because he can't have it. But then what happens is, it's not just that moment of suffering, it's the moments of suffering after that, right? Because then he's clinging to that idea. Then the alternative comes, but he's not willing to let go of that suffering of the past moment, of the previous moment. He's still caught up in that. He's still clinging to that, right? That's why clinging is so harmful, right? That's one reason why we understand that craving and clinging is a source of difficulty in our lives. And just like this little guy, right? At some point, he gets another opportunity to decide, is he going to let go of his clinging or not? Is he going to let go of clinging to the suffering of the past or not? And he decides, yes, he decides he's willing at that moment to let it go. Yeah. And to accept the reality that is in front of him. 2 giant cookies. That is the reality in front of him. Huh? So this is also, driven by this mechanism that the Buddha very clearly describes when he talks about the 5 aggregates, the 5, what we call khandas in Pali or skandhas in Sanskrit, right? This is driven by the way that when we have experiences, it sparks these basic feeling tones, this pleasantness or unpleasantness or neutral feeling that we have about everything that happens to us. And this is why, and so the Buddha speaks about studying feeling tones again and again and again and again. So that's why I will keep telling the story, actually, because if it was good enough for the Buddha to repeat, I think it's good enough for us to repeat here too, right? He talks about feeling tones in the dependent origination, right? And we saw that happen here. There was a certain kind of contact, right? Seeing the ice cream gives him a pleasant feeling tone. Then seeing the ice cream get taken away, that gives him a negative feeling tone. He's having all these different, right? Pleasant, unpleasant experiences. The Buddha also speaks about feeling tone in terms of the way in which we can study it as one of the foundations of mindfulness, right? That feeling, studying feeling tones gets its own whole category as a foundation for our ability to develop the capacity to see our lives, receive our experience clearly, to experience life with clarity. And ultimately, actually, he even is subtly referring to feelings in that first discourse when he tells us the Four Noble Truths. He says there is dukkha, right? There is this unsatisfactoriness or this difficulty, this painfulness of life, this suffering of life. And the source of that, or the basis of that, is the clinging and the craving. But if we look again back at that chain of dependent origination, where does craving come from? It comes from feeling tones. That's why it's said that that is where you can break the chain, just as he says in the third noble truth, the cessation of dukkha is possible. So it all fits together again and again. He is saying this is a crucial aspect of our path, is to begin to observe feeling tones and how we react to them, how we cling to them, how we bring them again and again and again and again into our experience, dragging the past back into the present. This is happening all the time. But there's an alternative. There is an alternative, and that is the path of awakening to clarity. So that's why I wanted to share a little bit of what's in Majjhima Nikaya 140, Middle Length Discourse number 140, the Dhammadīpā Sutta. It's quite a rich and complex sutta. We could, in fact, do several months of study of that sutta, and maybe we will at some point in the future, but not today. Today, we're just going to look at one small piece of it. And it is this piece about looking at what happens when we have contact. So just to give very briefly the background of this sutta, the Dhammadīpā Sutta is very interesting in that it begins with the Buddha arriving, for some reason, by himself at a potter's shed, at a potter's house, and he asks to stay in the potter's shed overnight. And the potter says, "Sure, you can do that, but there's already another renunciate there. There's already another ascetic staying there. So if it's okay with him, it's okay with me." And so the Buddha goes and he arrives there and he meets Pukasati. Claims to be a student of the Buddha. And the Buddha says, "Would you recognize the Buddha if you met him?" Because clearly he wouldn't. Clearly he wouldn't, because he is face to face with the Buddha. So that says all kinds of things also about the Buddha and about Pukasati. We're not even going to go to that part of the sutta. But the Buddha nonetheless recognizes him, Pukasati, as somebody who is ready to receive some teachings about insight. He doesn't start him out with teachings on ethics or on concentration, actually, for some reason, he decides that he's prepared for the insight teachings at that point. And he says there are 6 elements. So he names 6 elements of a human being. So we looked at 4 of them, right, just now during the meditation, right? Earth, water, fire, and air is the usual sequence that they're done in, although we did it a little differently because of our discovery process there. So you have those 4. Those are called the 4 great elements. And then he says space as an element. That's sometimes used in the suttas. We don't see it very often, but occasionally. And the Buddha defines all of these things in this sutta. In this case, he means space like just the absence of other form. So space in the normal way we would think about it. So like he says, like the hole in your nostril, for example, is an example of space that he gives. But then the 6th element that he is talking about here is the consciousness. Consciousness as an element. Dhatu is the Pali word, dhatu. And that is an aspect that is very subtle and complex. We could talk for a long time about what that means. But what essentially he starts to say is you can look at the consciousness element, you can observe consciousness and see contacts happening, right? And you can see feeling tones happening when contacts are happening. And you can see that each time it comes to an end. So he says, after we've studied the basic elements, there remains only consciousness, purified and bright. So he's talking about, right, getting deep into meditation. And then what does one cognize? What does one know with consciousness? One knows pleasant, unpleasant, neither painful neither unpleasant nor pleasant. I'm slightly shifting the translation that I have here, which is the Pali Text Society translation. So pleasant, unpleasant, or neither painful or that's funny, or pleasant. So independence on a contact, there arises that pleasant feeling, and one understands, I feel a pleasant feeling. And then one understands, and this is the crux of it here, with the cessation of that same contact, its corresponding feeling ceases and subsides. He says, just like 2 sticks, when you're trying to produce fire, you rub 2 sticks together. But if you separate the 2 sticks, then there's no fire, there's no friction. So when the contact comes to an end, when each moment of experience comes to an end, its corresponding feeling tone also comes to an end. So what the Buddha is saying here, I would suggest, is a very profound understanding of impermanence, of the arising of these phenomena, independence on each other, and then their ultimate impermanence. If we let it be done, it's done. I'll say it again. If you let it be done, it's done. Mm-hmm. So, and that kind of understanding, says the Buddha, then there remains only in this mind that has really deeply, completely known that really taken that in profoundly, then there remains only equanimity, purified and bright, malleable and radiant. Ah, okay. Right? Now you start to see this interesting human dilemma that you think that it's the holding on and the going back to it and the fixing it that will make it all better. But what actually is more true is that peace comes from letting it be as it is. And knowing that as it is, it comes to its natural end. Mm. Charlie's here having a little nightmare while while I'm telling this story. He's asleep. um, so this very profound and yet relatively straightforward study of what is the feeling tone, what is happening in this moment of experience. Before my reaction of wanting it or not wanting it or being okay with it or not okay with it, before any of those things, before having to do anything or manage, just what is it? Knowing it as it is. So some of you have heard me say, and this can be a point of confusion sometimes, this liking or disliking, that's not the same as the feeling tone, right? So the feeling tone is much more primitive than that, much more primitive, right? And so it's like, for me, for like some of my family members, like hot food, right? So it has a very unpleasant feeling in the mouth. There's burning happening. Maybe there's even tears happening because there's so much unpleasant feeling, and yet they like it, right? They like it. That's their reaction or response. That's the sankhara, the part on top of it. But the underlying thing itself is unpleasant. Do you see? So to make that distinction of what's really the very, very kind of, you could say, gut level sense of this, and how am I pushed or pulled around by that? So finally, we get a little bit toward the end of the sutta. And he says, one who understands this understands if he feels a pleasant feeling, it is impermanent. There's no holding on to it, and there's no delight in it. It doesn't mean that they don't feel the pleasant, right? They feel the pleasant. It's just that they don't add this other aspect of reactivity on top of that. The same thing for the painful feeling or unpleasant feeling, the same thing for the neutral feeling. You understand it's impermanent. There's no holding on to it. There's no delighting in it. And then he goes so far as to say, even when he feels a feeling terminating with life, he says, I feel a feeling terminating with life. And I understand that when this body dissolves with the end of life, if all that is felt is allowed to be impermanent and not clung to, then it all becomes cool right there. It all becomes peaceful right there. So even death, even the fear of death, is seen through. So he says that person can attain nibbana. Formerly they were ignorant, and then they have ultimate wisdom. Ultimate wisdom. So the study of human experience is right here, available to us in each moment. And the peace that can come from that study, or the peace that can come from that profound understanding, is also available to us in each moment. But it takes some time, right? It takes some time for us to see that that's how it works. We have to do it many, many, many times. Yeah. I'm sure that Hugging Buddy, it took him a while to begin to understand that not having ice cream was a good idea. Well, it took him a while. So we watch that too, right? We watch our reactions, our responses. We watch what's happening there and how we feed the cycle. And maybe someday we decide to just put a little less energy into that. So I bring up all of this particular day, this being December 28th, because it's time for resolutions, right? It's time for the end of the year, and people start to make their plans and their intentions. And I just want to put in a little plug for having at least one of your intentions be about the Dhamma, be about realizing the truths of your life, realizing this incredible, profound opportunity that you are presented with every single day. And then, like Hugging Buddy, you can choose the truth of this moment and find what's there, what's real, what's possible, what peace is possible in this moment. Even without getting that ice cream you wanted. Huh? Or whatever it was. It doesn't depend on that. It doesn't. If years of monastic life have taught me anything, it's that your happiness and your peace of mind does not depend on you getting what you want. You know, I've told many of you before, when I lived in the monastery in Japan, I didn't have anything I wanted. I didn't, the food, the haircut, the clothes, the temperature of the room, the roommate, the time, the waking up time, the going to bed time, the kind of work I did, none of it. Absolutely none of it. And that was a great learning for me to find how could I be okay, better than okay in that situation where nothing meets my preference. So don't also be fooled by your preferences, folks. Don't be fooled by your preferences, being met or not being met. Don't hang your hat on that thing that's out there. If only I had this thing or this relationship or that title or this resource, or because those things may be helpful or they may not. But your peace doesn't depend on that. Even health, you know that? When I was a hospice chaplain, I learned even your health and well-being is not necessary for you to be well and at peace. So I know that's a bit of tough love for your for your mid-holiday talk, but please give yourself that gift, or be strict with yourself, or whatever it is that motivates you to really get in there. And see the truth. You have everything you need. Okay, folks, so we have a bit of time for questions, reflections, comments. And now we have this new speaker here, so folks in the room can hear folks online a little bit better now. So little bit by little bit, we improve the tech situation. Yes.
Yes, hi. Thank you for the talk and the meditation. I am curious why why say feeling tone rather than feeling.
Yep. So I do that in order to distinguish between feeling tones and emotions. So emotions, like the sadness, for example, that Hugging Buddy was feeling that caused him to cry, or maybe frustration, or even some anger. We don't know. He's a little guy. He's not able to tell us exactly what he's feeling. But just to say, emotions are one of those responses and reactions to that pleasant or unpleasant or neutralness of the thing. It's a much more complex phenomena in the mind than the feeling tone, which is again very, very primitive and it's there's a scale certainly about it, but it is yeah, it's not emotions.
Can I ask a follow-up question about that?
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
I'm curious if that emotion being more complex is suggesting that it's bound up with thought and feeling tone is not a thought, or what?
Well, so technically, feeling tone is a thought in that it is mental activity and not physical in nature. It's related to the physical, but it is something that is known in the mind. So it is, you could say technically it is a thought, but it has to do with the complexity of emotion, and the fact of kind of separating the two, I believe, has to do with the you could say the kind of lag factor, right? So the emotion is based on some feeling tone. It is a reaction. So that other thing has to be experienced first.
Mm.
And then there's this, there's perception in the middle of that also. There's, memory and words that we put with things and sort of what we think is happening.
Mm-hmm.
And then the reaction on top of that. So already it's had a lot of time right, for sort of getting the wires tangled, so to speak.
And what is leading me to question that is that I've had a practice of questioning my beliefs and loving what is from questioning, coming to love what is through questioning my beliefs. So I'm
Mhm.
curious if that thought or feeling tone that's at that very primitive level is prior to forming a narrative or a story or a belief system.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, definitely. Yes. It's prior, it's actually pre-verbal even. Most of the time, that's one of the things that is, it can be a challenge about studying feeling tones, is that the feeling tone is not a verbal, is a pre-verbal phenomena. So, so um, it takes a while to get used to how to study it without trying to put a name on it all the time
Mm.
and just experience it along this continuum of, you know, the most completely blissed out, pleasant thing you can possibly experience, the most excruciating thing you can possibly experience, and everything in between that.
Thank you.
Mhm. Thank you for the question. Yes, Kylie.
Thank you, yes, for that talk. And the tough love is actually really loving and helpful. So thank you for that. Um, uh, I couldn't help but notice what was going on in my mind while you were sharing about this young boy, because I said, oh, yeah, I could easily let go of ice cream and grab some cookies. Um, but I can't let go of this. Um, I've been having a physical chronic pain issue. So I
Mm.
automatically like put that in a separate category. Like, well, yes, I understand if something I'm not getting what I want, I'm able to let go very frequently. But this is different. This isn't the same, you
Mhm.
know? And so I guess meaning like the feeling tone that comes with like a chronic physical feeling is so intense that it really kind of has a life. It takes on that whole sankhara, that whole life of its own, not sankhara, but the whole chain just becomes like honestly like a big ball rolling down a hill that's almost unstoppable. And it has to do with like a physical feeling. And so I guess my question would just be like, is it different when it's physical pain versus like emotional pain? And if it is, what thoughts do you have on that? Or if it's the same, what thoughts do you have on that?
Mm, I really don't think that it's different. I think that, emotional pain can be equally overwhelming and excruciating as, somebody who's in very chronic or very severe crisis of pain, those physical pain. At least that's in my experience
Yeah.
how it works. Um, and and there are various ways to think about how to work with it. Um, what I have found helpful is two things. One is to see pain, whether it's mental pain or physical pain, actually, but for me, physical pain particularly, to see it as a release, like the body letting off steam, like psh, that's what's happening there. Psh, and just to see it as a release, to understand it in that way, then I can, I can, again, like not be trying to hold on to it. I'm actually aware of how it's just an expression that's going. So that's one way to think about it. The Venerable Analayo wrote a whole book about death and dying and how to work with what were the teachings in the early suttas about that and about, when people get into very, very painful states that are not going to resolve. And the Buddha, interestingly, didn't tell, even people who were capable of it, he didn't tell them to go into like a fourth jhana or above, a state of concentration where you don't feel the body anymore. That it wasn't actually his recommendation. His recommendation was to just continue with your mindfulness, to as much as possible stay with it, and right, and just observe it as it is, and sort of you could get like a Sayadaw type of method of like, is this pressure? Is this tingling? Is this heat? Is this cold? Is this, vibrating, etc. So that degree of attention to it can, if it's steady, like one woman, when I was at Aloka Vihara, there was one woman who had told us like a few times about the story about when she broke her arm and she couldn't have any pain medications for various reasons, medical reasons. And she said at the beginning it was excruciating. It was very, very painful. And all she could do was pay attention to it. But by doing that, and then she started to say, oh, right, my practice. And she said, after a while, I could just be with it in a completely different way. It wasn't still painful, but I could be with it in a very, very different way that didn't overwhelm me. But it did require my attention, right? She had to be willing to put her full attention there for a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. I think there's so much thrown at you to get away from the pain all the time that you start to think that that's correct and appropriate, and with emotional pain too. So yeah, thank you.
Yes. Yes. And I will add, actually, Kylie, I will add that it doesn't do to overwhelm ourselves either. In other words, it doesn't do to try to ignore your personal limits of your practice. If you say, I'm I'm feeling overwhelmed with this, there's just no way for me to really continue to work with it, then that's also a kindness to yourself, a self-compassion to just say, okay, I need more help. I need more tools. I need more support, right? Whether, again, it's a physical pain or an emotional pain. If overwhelm is happening consistently, then, and you're feeling harmed by that, right? Then and I'm not saying you personally, I mean, in general, one is feeling harmed by that, then it's also great to have some self-compassion and say, I need more help in whatever way, I can get some more support for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks. Hi, Stig.
Yeah, this sort of fits in, I think, to what you were just describing. But while I was listening to Evelyn's talk, and in the space between that and before Kylie uh, uh, came into the conversation, I had an extreme attack. I call it an attack by our cat, Rue, digging into my foot, digging into my hand, and I just had to do something about it. So I just picked him up, put him down, and I could feel actually when I did that, there was a sense of aggression in me doing this. And but I had and this judging mind was coming in. Well, how is this relating to what you've just been speaking about? And now Rue is lying very quietly in his cubby hole at peace, and I'm feeling the follow-up reaction or response to this behavior that felt questionable to me. So it's as if the whole process was working itself out, and I saw that act as like self-compassion, I guess, is what you were describing just now. But it was hard to really get into that space. And this is not the first time this has happened. So I keep wondering, is it going to be another time? Because I felt we had a pretty good relationship going into this talk and while it was happening. So anyway, I just put that out there as a reflection.
Yes.
Feel free to comment further on that if you feel anything can be learned from that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, Stig, thank you for sharing that. I think, you know, as always, I really hear your powers of observation. You've really, really honed your ability to observe what's happening in your mind and, and express it in some detail. I think the thing that I would wonder, or that I would suggest for you to study a bit, would be that part of the what is it that shifts into the aggression. Kylie's sending us balloons, I think by accident there. But balloons, we'll take them. Why not? Okay. Right? What is right? This because generally it would be the sense of self is in some way feeling impinged upon, right? You're like, hey, this is my body. This I don't want to feel that pain, or I don't want you, you know,
Yeah.
doing that to me. And that part, could that happen without that little extra tinge? Could it? Or is there something there? But it did happen. And then again, as you said, not to give yourself a lot of grief about that, but just observe, oh yeah, that happened in that way. And what were the conditions of surrounding that? And, you know,
Mhm. Yeah, I don't want to reinforce the association with aggression to the end result there. I mean, that's sort of, I think, the same
right.
thing that you're saying. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
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 Lots
Right.
more
In
work to
other
do.
words,
Yeah.
ruse aggression, whether he's feeling or not feeling aggression is separate from your response to your own feeling of care and defense of your body. Do you see
Yeah.
what
Yeah,
maybe?
I was anthropomorphizing or anthropocentrizing Rue being a teenager, teenageritis and the attention being lost and suddenly, hey, grow up kind of a thing. But how you know? Okay, thanks so much. I
Yeah.
think we've
Okay.
exhausted this. Okay.
And thank you for putting your name up there, Evelyn, because otherwise I would have called you the wrong thing.
Sorry about
So,
that. Yeah, I forget sometimes.
no, it's all right. It's all right. Claudia, ok, ¿cómo lo vamos a hacer? Creo que en inglés, ¿verdad? Es mejor. Y entonces te daré tiempo para que vuelvas a dar el resumen en español. ¿Sí? Ok, déjame quitarte de interpretación entonces. Hold that thought, folks. So Claudia and I are going to have a conversation in English, but then we're going to put her back as interpreter and then give her a minute or so to restate the question in Spanish.
Okay, so I was wondering if there's any suttas that talk about, I actually like a lot this practice of feeling tones. I think it has helped me a lot to identify when I am rejecting things or when I am wanting more from one thing. And I have found like tremendous suffering when I reject, tremendous. Always, also when I want, but more when I reject. It's like a lot of suffering. But I was wondering, because sometimes it's primitive, then it takes you to an emotion. And so when the emotion is there, which is also full of many other complex things, does the Buddha talk something about working with emotion, like working in reverse, like you see this emotion and then you go in reverse and see what was the feeling tone, and maybe because I think there's a lot of information also that I think we need to see in a way. I sometimes doubt it, but I don't know. Like, do we really need to reflect on our emotions so that we can know know ourselves better and know what is our trauma, what is our attachments, you know what I mean?
Mm, mm.
So I was
Okay.
wondering. Mhm. So,
Okay, so now we're going to give you a chance to
mhm,
go say it all in
please.
Spanish, and then I will respond. Gracias, Claudia.
Gracias, Aya.
Okay. So while she's doing that, I just want to check the number of the one. Yeah. ¿Lista? Okay, bien. So first of all, I just want to say it's interesting that you note that the aversion or the pushing away causes more dukkha for you than the wanting or the attachment. It might not be that way for everyone, but it's good that you are observing that that's how it's working for you and that you want to work with that. Um, the uh, the practice of observing the feelings is pretty much not often described in much more detail than what you find here in the sutta that I mentioned today. So in the sutta that I mentioned today, which is Middle Length Discourse 140, there is a section on that, on the how to feel the painful feelings or see what it is that is how those are related. He also does go into a little bit of emotions in the next part. So what we covered today was the section on wisdom, but then the next section is on truth. And there's also a little bit more in there about emotions. But I would say that for me, there are two practices that have been the most helpful in terms of emotions. One is metta, the practice of metta, for dealing with aversion, anger, frustration, all of the kind of rejecting things. And not in terms of practicing metta at the time that that happens, but rather practicing metta so that I establish a different kind of basis in the mind, a different place I'm coming from. So when those things happen that might lead to rejection or reaction in that way, I'm coming from a different place. I'm coming from a softer place. I'm coming from a place with more self-understanding or more self-nourishment. So that's one aspect that might be helpful. The other thing is, in of all the unlikely places, in Middle Length Discourse 137, Majjhima Nikaya 137, is a sutta that I've taught many, many times. It is the Salayatana Vibhanga, is the analysis of the six sense fields or six sense domains. And he starts with the sense domains, but then he goes immediately into things that bring joy, things that bring sadness, things that bring equanimity, how to really notice these kinds of reactions and responses that bring joy or bring sadness, or and really then there's a series of statements of him saying how to work with one in order to overcome the suffering of the other. And he goes through a little list there. So I can point you at some Dhamma talks that I've given on that. But that sutta in particular, I would say, is very much a kind of how-to of, taking basically just these two categories, joy and sadness. Somanasa and Domanasa is the Pali word. So these kind of like generalized words for the pleasant, positive emotional experience and the difficult or painful, suffering, sad, emotional experience. Yeah. Okay. Great. So we are at our time, despite the fact that I'd be happy to continue talking about this for a very long time. I just want to call out Michelle in the chat saying it's hard not to cling, but we keep trying. And indeed, that is the case, right? That is the case. So don't get discouraged either, right? That release from all clinging, that's nibbana. That's the culmination of the path. So up until that point, there is always a little bit of clinging you can discover. All right, so I think that we are ready for our dear Dana, if she's still with us. Oh, there she is. Okay.
Thank you. The practice of giving and receiving has been a part of Buddhism since its inception. Giving to Dassanaya Buddhist community supports Dhammadīpā, our guiding teacher, the physical location at the Vihara, and allows us to continue to offer Buddhist teachings in support of the awakening of all beings. Our support pages are on the website under the support tab, and we have ways broken into financial support on donate, volunteering your time and expertise under volunteer, and you can also subscribe to the newsletter. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Dana. And yes, much gratitude to everyone who provides all of the supports that make it possible for us to be a sangha, to be a community together. And may our practice lead to great clarity, that we and all beings might know the truths of our lives, that we might know ourselves as wisdom, as compassion, and that all beings might be free from every form of suffering and delusion by the power of the Buddhas, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, and each one's efforts. May all beings be completely liberated. Bye, everyone. Have a happy new year.